Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. My name is Helena Catala. I'm a program manager and GIS specialist at the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. I'm actually based in the State College office, but I do work statewide. And I've been working on this Circuit Trails gap analysis for about the past year. And Patrick is going to give a quick intro just on sort of the background and how this came about. And then I'm going to dive into the actual mapping tool and go through all the functionality that provides and how to use it. And then hopefully this can be a resource that you can refer back to in the future. So Patrick.
Well, thank you, Helena. And I just want to say before I launch into my intro that you have really the two creators of this, Z and Helena, on this webinar. I just got to benefit from their expertise and stick-to-itiveness through what was a very iterative process of creating this tool. But let me start with why we did this. I think that going back before the current strategic plan that was adopted by the Circuit Trails Coalition late last year, we had already embarked on the circuit pipeline tool that we were trying to populate with the most up-to-date and insightful information from many of you. I like to think of it as a bit of a kind of a wiki site where all of you were creating and contributing to that. And you can continue to do that with Z's help in terms of credentials and such. But we really saw that there was power in the information. We've long had a great relationship with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. We've long relied on Chris and Sean and others there for much of our information. But as I used to joke, it was like, well, we need to call Sean. Where's Sean? We need to call Chris. Well, the idea behind creating the circuit pipeline tool was that we could have access to the information about each of our trail segments in the region at our fingertips. I think that after the events of 2020 and the Circuit Trails strategic planning process, where we decided to make equity and to some extent diversity and such a core, it's not really a theme, it's like a principle in our strategic plan. We thought about how do we take the information that we have about trail segments and how do we begin to try to drive towards those underserved communities and to try to drive the development of trail miles towards those places that we knew were underrepresented in the circuit trails. We know that's a combination of social issues, historic racism. It's also proximity. If the trail isn't in your community, you're going to be less likely to use it. We never thought that it would suddenly change the work that we're doing. Naturally, the projects that are already underway are going to be the ones that we work on first and try to bring to the finish line to completion as we seek to make our 500-mile goal by 2025. But what we did think is that as we're thinking about what new projects are we going to take on, what new resources are we going to bring to bear, this tool could be helpful to you to try to prioritize where your resources, where your time, talent, energies would get the biggest return, not just in miles built, but rather in connection to underserved communities. I've long heard in my profession, in my years with trail work and with open space work before that, the term about, low-hanging fruit. Well, I think what we know about low-hanging fruit is that low-hanging fruit rarely is found in underserved communities. Underserved communities lack resources. Many are characterized, as our own data analysis shows, highest density areas of the region. So they're just not the easiest places to build a trail. If we only go after low-hanging fruit, my concern, and I think this is reflected in what we have today of our network, is that we don't end up building trails in those communities that most need it. So with that said, this is really your tool. It's meant to serve you and to help you as you establish your priorities looking out over the next several years and, a decade, because we're not going to be done. Even if we get to our 500 goals in 2025, building out the Circuit Trails network was always viewed as something that was going to take till 2040. So we have a lot of time to steer the ship towards where we need most to work on these trails. So Helena can tell you all about how this tool can be used and what information it will provide you. And we see it, if Z didn't say this already, we see this as a very iterative thing. The tool will continue to change. It's one of the reasons we went with this model versus issuing reports, because the reports are static, but this information changes constantly. So with that, Helena, take it away.
Thanks, Patrick. So before we dive into the tool itself, I do just want to briefly go over a little bit of the methodology that we used to come up with the scores in the gap analysis. And this information is also in an information panel on the tool and in our Circuit Trails gap analysis report. But we used 8 different factors that we decided on via an iterative process within PEC and with some guidance from the Circuit Trails Steering Committee. And these 8 factors are combined to make up the total score of each of the segments. And each of these factors are weighted differently depending on the importance that we felt it played in creating an equitable network. So the highest weighted factor was IPD score. If you're not familiar with IPD scores, DVRPC has some great resources on their website explaining their methodology. But basically, that is a combination of factors that ranks census tracts, I believe, by their IPD as indicator of potential disadvantage. For our analysis, we decided to pull out just 3 of their 9 factors and really focus on racial minorities, ethnic minorities, and low income. So in the tool where you see focused IPD score, that just takes into account those 3 factors, whereas the DVRPC IPD score is their full suite of 9 factors. We also ranked segments based on connection miles. So that's existing miles of connectivity as well as fully funded in progress segments. We decided that in this analysis, we would essentially treat those as existing. And that was weighted times 2. We also looked at population density in the census tracts within a half mile of the trail segment. We looked at connection to parks as well as waterways. So higher ranking segments connect to both parks and waterways, whereas just to a park, it's a little bit less, and none is 0. Connections to employment centers. This data was also pooled at the census tract level, number of jobs in census tracts within a half mile of segments. Connection to transit, so rail stations as well as bus stops. Vehicle access, which came from census data, and this is people's accessibility to vehicles with it by census tract, and the percentage of a population without access to a vehicle, as well as length of the individual segment that we're talking about. So the total score for each segment is the sum of all of those weighted scores. So when we're in the tool and looking at the total score, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a better idea of where those came from. So now we'll switch over to the tool itself. So when you first open up the mapping tool, this is the screen that you'll see. Obviously, there is the map of the whole Circuit Trails region. This little legend box over here tells you what you're looking at. So the yellow is the Circuit Trails gap analysis layer. Those are the segments that we actually did the analysis on, and probably the data that you're going to be interacting with the most in this map. On the base map, we have the full Circuit Trails network. Of course, the existing trails are not included in that gap analysis. And then, we have the counties. This legend here, if you want to close it out so that you can see the map better, you can just exit out right there. If you want to see it again, it's this little icon that looks like some bullets in a list, and you can open that back up. If you add different layers into this map, those will pop up in the legend, and we'll get to see that in a little bit. If you want to change the base map, this little icon that's a collection of blocks is the base map gallery. You can click on that, and a variety of different base maps pop up. If you want to take a look at aerial imagery, there's topographic maps. There's all kinds of fun maps in here. If you want to change the base map around. And then I will just mention this little print icon here to the right of the base map gallery is how you're going to be able to export custom maps for use outside of this tool. But we will get to that at the end of the webinar. Just moving up here to the top left, this search bar is how you can find a specific segment. If you don't want to look through the table down here. So let's say you want to find the Wissahickon Gateway. You can type that into here, and a bunch of different segments pop up. If you scroll down, you can see the gray headers show you which layer you're looking in. If you don't want to look through this whole list, you can use this little drop down on the left here to choose which layer you want to search in. So if you just want to search in the gap analysis layer, you can select that. And then this much streamlined list shows up. You click on the segment you want, it'll zoom into that segment, and a little pop-up will appear that has all the relevant information about that segment. So we've got total score, main trail, all these different factors that went into the analysis. And that information is also down here in this table that pops up. So this pops up automatically when you open the tool. But if you don't want to look at it, if you want to have a better view of the map, you can just click this little down arrow and that'll hide it. If you want to see it again, click the up arrow, and you can change the size of this as well if you're interacting with the table a little more and want to make it bigger. And the layers that are going to show up in the map will show up down here in this attribute table section. So in the map right now, we have the gap analysis layer, the Circuit Trails layer, and the counties layer. And so if you add layers, those tables will appear down here as well. If you take them off the map, they'll disappear from down here. And we'll go into a little more detail on how to interact with this attribute table a little later. You can sort and filter by all of these different columns. So we'll go into that in a little bit. The table is sorted by main trail as the default, but you can certainly change that, and I'll show you how in a little bit. To get back to the main or the full overview of the region, you can click this little button that looks like a house, and that'll take you back to the home screen and the full view. So off on the left here, we have a few different panes of information. The default pop-up view here is just a little bit of information about the Circuit Trails gap analysis. We have a link to the gap analysis report here that goes into greater detail on the methodology as well as our initial findings. And I encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't yet. We also have some information on how to use this map. So, there's going to be a lot of information coming at you today. If you forget and don't want to go through the whole webinar again, you can just refer to this about area, and it'll give you instructions on a lot of what we're going to go through today. And then down at the bottom here, we'll just make a note of when this data was last updated. So the Circuit Trails Gap Analysis layer, it is our intention to update it at least twice yearly. We don't have the capacity to do rolling updates as they come in necessarily, but we will update the analysis 2 times a year. The last time we did a full update was September of 2022. However, we did do some other updates this fall as they came in. The other data in this map that you'll see in a little bit is updated when the source updates that data. So we were linked to a variety of DBRPC data sets, some census data sets. And so when those sources update their data, the layers in this map will automatically be updated. So this about section is the very left little info icon here. The one to the right is just going to be a list of some of the attribute definitions. So attributes are all of these little columns in the table. Each of these is called an attribute. And so these definitions just explain like what that means. So for all the different scores, how we scored them. So like for length score, for instance, a score of 3 means that segment is greater than 10 miles in length. A score of 1 means less than a half mile or less than a mile. And we have that listed out for all of the different scores. And then we also have a note of how it was weighted. So in the table, you'll see weighted scores. And so that'll just give you an idea of how we did that if you want to refer to it. The next one over to the right is a set of preset maps. And we created these as an easier way to get to all the top 10 lists. So in our report, we created lists of the top 10 segments in all the counties, as well as 4 different themes. And then we basically translated those lists into these layers. So if you click on, this Bucks County icon, for instance, it'll zoom into the county outline, and just those top 10 segments will show up. And then that table also shows up in this attribute table area, and you can see that list. And then, let's go to equity top 10, and that'll give you our top 10 segments ranked for equity, which takes into account IPD score and population density. Now, these highlighted segments by themselves might not tell you very much, and you want to add in the full Circuit Trails layer or some other layers to give you more information. Just to the right of that is the layer list, and that has a list of all of the different layers that are available for you to add to this map. So for a little more context, you might want to check on the full Circuit Trails layer, and you can see where these top segments are in relation to the whole network. Or, since this is the equity layer, you might want to see a map of IPD scores. So you can check on the IPD score layer, and that'll give you this map of IPD scores. And then if you're not sure, like, okay, what do these colors mean? You can come over here to the legend and see, okay, darker red is a higher IPD score, and these are where the breakdowns are. And then also in the layer list, you can change a little bit of how they look. So for instance, this IPD score layer is really bold. It's kind of hard to see these segments on the map. You can come over here and click on the 3 dots and change the transparency. So you can make it a little more transparent. And then, you can see these highlighted segments a little better. That especially comes in handy if you're going to be exporting your own maps and you want to add a variety of different layers on top of each other. So just to go through some of the layers that are in this list, we have all of the top 10 layers, so you can turn them on. You don't have to go to the preset maps to turn them on. You can turn them on in this list as well if you want to switch back and forth between them. The Circuit Trails gap analysis layer, again, is that layer of all of the segments that we analyzed. We have an employment centers layer. So this is at the census tract level. If you come over here to the legend, once again, you can see what the different colors indicate. We have some protected open space. Let me try to get this out of here. Vehicle availability. Again, that's the percentage of the population without access to a vehicle. So the darker purple is a greater percent without access. We have a layer of bus stops in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey, as well as rail stations in both states. I do want to make a note, the SEPTA bus stops layer, we have the entire layer in here, but for the analysis, we excluded the bus stops in Philadelphia. Since there's such a high concentration of them, we felt as though that would be skewing the data a little bit. So we included them in the suburban counties, as well as all the bus stops in New Jersey. And then this transit buffer layer basically just shows a half mile from each of the transit stops, because that's the buffer distance that we used. It just helps visualize a little bit better which segments are within that half mile. So then I'm going to go into a little bit more on how to sort data in this attribute table here. So just to remind you, the attribute definitions are in this little icon second from the left. If you want to take a look at what each of the columns means. And this layer should be sorted by main trail to start. I'm not sure why it's not suddenly popped up as not. But if you, let's say you want to sort by total score and have a list of the highest to lowest score for all of the segments, you just click the top of this column and then sort descending. And now you have a list of all of the segments sorted from highest to lowest score. And you can do that for any of the columns in this table. Obviously, you can sort ascending as well, sort by name. And then if you want to zoom into this segment, so let's say you're like, okay, where is this segment? I want to see it closer up. You can click to the left here, the left of the row, it'll highlight it. So it'll be highlighted on the map. And then if you click zoom to here, it'll zoom into that segment. So you can take a closer look, see where it is. And then obviously all of the relevant information is here in the table. And if the table is a little bit unwieldy and you don't want to scroll all the way back and forth, and you're just interested in a few of the attributes, you can go into options here and click show and hide columns. And you can remove some of these columns that you may not be interested in looking at if you want that table to just take up your screen and not have to scroll back and forth. To clear out of the selection, you just click clear selection right here. And then another sort of advanced operation would be to filter the data based on a variety of factors. So if you don't want to look at all of the segments, you're only interested in the ones above a certain threshold score-wise or in a certain county, we have the ability to filter the data. So this last little icon up here is the filter pane. And we have a few preset filters here that relate to the themes in the report. So we have transportation, equity, recreation, employment, and population. And these are not the only ways that you can filter the data, but we decided these would be maybe some of the most useful or popular. And so let's say we wanted to check out segments that connect to at least 10 miles of existing trail. We could type a 10 into here, and you do have to have this little toggle on for the filter to work. So if you just type something in, it won't work. But if you turn that on, it'll filter out everything except the segments that connect to at least 10 miles of trail. And those will also show up down in this table here. You can once again sort these by score or any other attribute you'd like. Let's say we wanted to add in some other filters. You can turn on multiple filters at once. So let's say, we want to take a look at these segments, but filter out IPD scores that are less than 24. You can come over here, click 24, make sure that this toggle is on, and we see, oh, there are 3 features that meet both of those criteria. And to turn the filters off, you just toggle the filter off. If you want to change this, you can, change it to a different value pretty easily. And you can add filters to any of these and all of them at once if you'd like. You just need to make sure that this little button is toggled on for the filter to work. And to get out of them, just click them off, and we'll be looking at all 255 segments again. But let's say you want to filter by a factor that's not one of these, just a specific county, for instance. You can create a custom filter by coming down here to these 3 little dots. Click on that. This first icon to the left is the custom filter. Click on that. You'll need to choose which layer you want to filter. Most often, you're probably going to be filtering the Circuit Trails Gap Analysis layer. But for whatever reason, if you want to filter any of these other ones, that option is available. So we'll click the Gap Analysis layer. And then add expression is basically adding the factor that you want to filter by. So this little box will pop up, and click the drop down, and these are all the different attributes in that table. You can filter by any of them. So let's say we want to look at a specific county, click county. This is just is, but you can, does contain, is any of, is none of. There's all this variety of options. So let's say we want to look at Chester County. Type in Chester, hit enter, and it'll zoom into just Chester County, and only Chester County segments will show up in the attribute table down here. And you can do the same thing for any other attribute. If you want to look at only a specific trail, you can come in here and look at, main trail. One thing that might be helpful if you aren't what exactly the trail is named in our tool, or to avoid any spelling issues or spacing issues, you can click this little settings icon and come down here to unique input, and that'll give you a drop down So this is the list of all the trails we list as main trail in our data. So let's say we want to look at this one, you can click that, and just the segments along that trail will show up in the map as well as in the attribute table. So I think I do want to go over how to export lists and maps from the tool, but I think now might be a good time to pause. If anyone has specific questions or specific scenarios that you'd be interested in learning how to filter for, I can go through some of those if anybody has anything. Otherwise, I will move on to exporting, and then we can take questions at the end. So Z, I don't know if I haven't been looking at the chat at all.
Yeah, I just looking through. So far, we haven't gotten any specific questions about how to go through any operations in the tool. But yeah, just wanted to let everyone know if you have any questions, and if you'd prefer to ask a question verbally instead of typing it into the chat box, you can just let me know in the chat or in the Q&A, and I can allow you to, I don't know, click a button and it'll allow you to speak. So just give a second or two to see if anyone has any specific questions. But I think you've been doing a great job walking through everything so far, H.
All right, well, I will just go over exporting the tables and maps real quick, give everybody a time to think about it. So let's say you have, I'll go back to that Chester County example. So let's say you just want a map of those segments. And you want to be able to export it from this tool and use it, however you'd like. As I mentioned earlier, it's this print icon. So you can just click on that. It gives you a few options for layout. Map only will just export a map. And then these other layouts will export, you have options to export a scale and a legend with it as well. So let's just say you want, landscape layout, letter size. You can name your map, whatever you'd like. So Chester County segments. And then you can choose what format you'd like to export. So default is PDF, but you can also export as a JPEG or any of these other formats. Down here in advanced settings, you can check whether to include a legend, what you want the scale bar unit to be. The map only size is if you choose that map only setting, you can set a specific pixel width and height if you're putting it in another document or report or something. But mostly these default settings are probably going to be what you go with. And then if you just hit print, it'll take a sec and create your print. And really that just means it's creating a PDF. And then whenever it's done, you'll be able to click on that. And you will have a PDF map with your legend and scale down here. And keep in mind, you can, of course, change the base map. So if you change the base map in the tool, you can print out a map or export a map with whatever base map you choose. You can choose any different layers. If you want one of these other layers in your map as well, you can select those, and whatever is on your screen when you export is going to be the map that you get. So then if you want to export this list as well, whatever list is down here in the attribute table visible to you is going to be what exports. And to do that, you come down here to options. And the last one is export all to CSV. and click that. It's going to ask you if you want to export data to a CSV file. Click OK. It'll create that file. CSV files can be opened in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever your spreadsheet software of choice is. And then that'll export this table exactly how you see it in the tool. And then, you can share that or do whatever you'd like with that table. So that concludes the walkthrough of the tool. Like C said, we're happy to take any questions, any specific scenarios that you're interested as far as the filtering goes. Any questions about the data?
Hey, we did receive one question from Roland Ralph. Can we look at the gap in Manayunk between the pedestrian bridge and the Valley Forge Trail, which I'm assuming is the Schuylkill River Trail? Patrick, do you know exactly where that would be, or should we ask?
I think that Ralph is probably interested in the alignment there in terms of what is planned from the endpoint on the Manayunk Bridge. So if you zoom in, you can take a look at that. I think that well, we can let him speak, but I guess that he's interested in this complex configuration here.
Right. Let me, okay, he says correct. Ralph, I can,
yeah, is there some
I need to
specific,
talk here.
yeah,
So,
is there
yeah.
something specific we can answer for you, Ralph, in terms of these, this complicated sort of two-sided, Schuylkill River Trail?
Yes, I think I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's specifically what you've got highlighted here on the map. I mean, there are two things happening. One of them, of course, is when you come along and get onto the Wissahickon there. That's just a nightmare when you're on a bicycle and there are people standing waiting on the bus. That's one thing I'm concerned about. The other one is the gap between the pedestrian bicycle bridge that dumps out of the Ballackinwood Trail, and it just dead ends. I mean, even if you persevere and go along the gravel, you just end up in a parking lot, what appears to be a parking lot of, some apartment buildings. So I'm just wondering when that's going to get connected to the other end,
Right.
where it attaches to the Valley Forge Trail, because some of
We
us
wish
just
that
ride.
we could answer your question.
Okay.
What I'm going to do is ask you to chat with some of us post this webinar about what is anticipated and planned in that area, because it's not exactly related to our presentation, but it's a really worthwhile conversation to have, Ralph. So don't get me wrong, like it's not a straightforward answer. Sarah Clark Stewart and the Bike Coalition have been really interested in what happens at the end of the Manayunk Bridge, and I'm sure you're aware of the current sort of pedestrian path. So do me a favor, let's stick around after the webinar and see if there are any questions about the actual tool that we can answer.
Okay. I mean, I would be
worries,
interested.
okay?
And that's fine. Thank you. I don't want to take up other people's time
no,
on something.
Like I said, it's a very good question, but it's not, I want to make sure we answer questions about the tool right now. And we actually have a bunch of those right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Ralph. Yeah, so as Patrick mentioned, we have some other questions coming in. So Eleanor Horn asked, can you draw on the map or add items such as schools?
So we can add a feature to the map where you can add your own data layers. That is an option for one of the widgets up here. We can add that in, and then if you have a data layer from the web, you can just link to that and it'll add it into your map. We do not have the capability to draw on the map, unfortunately. But if folks are interested in the functionality of adding your own layers, that's certainly something that we can add in pretty easily.
Yeah, so definitely let me know or let us know in the chat if that functionality
Yeah.
specifically is something you'd be interested in. Ellen Miramontes from Montgomery County asked, due to the shape of our county, Montgomery maps are often shown with north at an angle. Would it be possible to rotate the angle of a map for printing as a PDF when you want to do that function?
I don't believe so. Just make sure it's not in here. Yeah, I don't believe that you can rotate the map within the tool. I suppose one option would be to export the map and then kind of make your own layout and rotate the map once it's like as an image once it's exported. But unfortunately it's Esri's not that advanced, I guess, when it comes to map making.
Thanks. Anton asks, is there a way to request / suggest changes to the map through the website? And I can just answer that one and just let you know, Anton, the best way to let us know about suggested changes is just to email myself and or Helena, and I'll drop our emails in the chat. And like we said earlier on, we'll try to make as many changes as we can. And if there's anything very urgent, then we'll definitely make our best effort to get that changed as quickly as possible. But otherwise, updates will happen on a batch level twice a year. So the next ones will be coming at the end of spring or early summer of 2023.
My email is at the bottom of this about section. So if anybody has any comments or questions later on as you're using the tool, feel free to reach out. And as Patrick or Z mentioned earlier, this is definitely an iterative process. We're just kind of figuring this out as well, and we always welcome any feedback.
Then we had a couple questions from John. First one being API REST automated updates. John, I'm not completely sure what you meant by that, but the other question is there a map only option for printing? We've been able to print large scale maps with the print only in a similar app. So I believe there is. I'll let Helena show that, and then maybe I can enable you to talk to explain the API question a little bit more.
Do you mean what? I'm a little confused by what's meant by map only. I think maybe what you mean is something like, yes.
Excuse me.
So something like that, where it's not going to have like the legend and all of that.
Hold on, I'm gonna.
I was gonna say, we can let John talk.
That's hard with it not being a conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're on.
All right, I can hear myself too. Apparently, there's an echo. So you figured it out with the map only. It's just when you go to advanced, if you click on the advanced, you can put in as many pixels as you map only size. So what we've done with our maps is with our regional bike map is that we've just added zeros to those numbers, basically. Yeah, wasn't figuring out, but you can do large scale maps. I'm just wondering, since I'm not looking at the app myself, I wasn't sure if you guys had that function.
Yep. And
API
thank you for pointing that out.
I know as much as you about it, Z, but I do know that when, like for the circuit trails, I just put in, I think you're doing the same thing where you're just connecting to their feed and they're automatically updating.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that map, if this map's going to have that function. We know it on our maps because I don't know how the hell to do it. So
You mean the other layers in this map automatically updating? or folks
Yeah,
being
I'll-
able to automatically update their maps from this map.
No, if we were able to display your data, would that be updated automatically? Like when you update it, or would I have to?
Yeah, so we currently don't have, well, yeah, we could make that available. Yeah, I guess I just need to, we don't have like a public data site or anything. But I think there might be a way for me to enable you to export that layer from this map. And I'll look into that a little bit further on the back end. And then, I can certainly follow up via email in a little bit, see if you want to share email or connect us or something.
Yeah.
I can certainly follow up on that, because that would be a good functionality for sure.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Okay, great. So I'm not seeing anything else. And I realize it's getting close to 2, so everyone is, free to stay on as long as they can. But I figure at this point, it might make sense for Helena to just go through a couple of scenarios to show maybe some of the more detailed functions of the mapping portal. And if you can stick around for those, then feel free. And otherwise, you can always reach out directly to myself or Helena, and of course watch the recording when we get that distributed. So yeah, Helena, I don't know if you want to go through.
I don't have anything queued up. I was hoping to maybe get some scenarios from the audience as far as like what might be useful to you all in terms of filters or any other functions of the tool.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to go into like zooming in on a specific segment and then filtering, showing how to filter in the attribute table various, features about that segment. If we can do that, and then maybe also showing how to draw down on, aside from the preset maps, maybe some lists of trails based on IPD score or connection or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, so let's see if we zoom into a segment, just pick one randomly here. If you zoom into a segment, you click on that segment, you can see all of its information here. You can't really create lists based on a specific segment. So, you can come down into the table and find that segment, and then, see all of its information in the table or in this attribute table or in this pop-up. You can add different layers, when you're looking at that segment. So, you come in here and want to check out, IPD score. Okay, what's the IPD score like around that segment? You can click on the layers, and a pop-up will appear that has all the information about that layer. So you can see here, okay, this IPD score is 16, and then here it drills down into all the factors and where it ranks with all the different factors. And then we also have another link here talking a little more about IPD scores and that methodology. So you can do that for any of the layers. So for like vehicle availability, for instance, you can click on this tract and it brings up all the information about it. So you can dive pretty deep with the data in that way. And obviously also it shows up in these tables down here. As far as filtering goes, Z, do you want to give me a scenario?
Yeah, excuse
Maybe
me. Yeah,
I
well,
don't have anything off the top of my head.
well, I'm wondering, like, maybe also it would be helpful to show, from the home screen, if I'm looking for, a section of the Lawrence Hopewell Trail, how would I filter down to just that, those segments of trails, and then zoom in there?
Yeah, so I think probably the easiest way to do that, if you want to look for the trail, not on the map, just, in the table and look at all the segments on that trail, is going to be creating one of those custom filters. So once again, it's these 3 dots at the bottom of the filter pane. First one over to the left. And come down here and look at main trail. Set the input type to unique so that we can see that list, because I know sometimes it's LHT, sometimes it's Lawrence Hopewell Trail. Looks like it's LHT in here. Make sure your filter is toggled on. And it'll zoom into all the Lawrence Hopewell Trail segments. And down here in the attribute table, you can see there's 4 segments of the LHT that we did the analysis on. They're sorted by total score. So you can see what all those segments are. You can click to the left of the row to highlight. So you can see, okay, that's that segment. Come over here, check out its status, all the different scores. And then, we click that one. Where's that? You can zoom to it. And then, if you wanted to export just this list or just this map, you can certainly do so, as I just showed you all. And then, you can sort this by any of the factors, of course. So let's say I want to sort it by population density. Once again, click on the top of the column, sort descending, and then it'll be sorted by population density.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And then of course you can search by segment name up at the top. So
Yep. So if you know the segment name, that's an easier way to find just one individual segment for sure. And then if you want to clear, you can clear selection, and then to turn off the filter and get back to the home or all the trails, you just toggle that off.
Great, yeah. And we did receive one more question from Tim Brill. How can this tool help to add missing segments to the circuit? So Tim, I'm going to take you off mute here. And yeah, if you just want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I just want to see if there's any way we can use this. It's an awesome tool, number one. You guys have done phenomenal work here. But we're working in Mercer County on a project involving a bridge over the Interstate 295 on the Johnson Trolley line, which is an existing trail on both sides of the interstate highway, and it ranks pretty high on the list and all that. But in the spirit of making connections where most needed, the project is evolving into extensions from the end of the Johnson Trolley Trail into the city of Trenton, and then also onto Princeton here. So, and right now, if you zoom in on the Johnson Trolley line, you can see that it's kind of a spur trail at the moment with a missing connection to the city of Trenton. And I'm just wondering, I mean, if we identified that as a potential trail segment gap, I got to think that would score really high in the regional ranking of priorities.
So you're saying that that segment's currently not in the in the circuit trails layer or the analysis, correct?
Correct. Yeah, this would be the southern end of the Johnson Trolley.
Mhm.
So why don't you, Helena, demonstrate searching for that main trail? You've already done it once, but I'd go ahead and like use the tool to do that. But, you know, while Helena's doing that, Tim, I mean, I think you may be aware that the way to add trail miles in effect, you know, so new segments to the circuit trails is really to get your county planning office to request that of Sean and Chris and the staff at DVRPC. So I think that you're saying at the what's on the bottom of this screen right now showing in yellow, I think you're saying there's more trail that's actually being planned from that point going towards Trenton. Is that what you're telling us?
Correct. Yes,
And
and
I mean, and I know you work with the county planning staff at Mercer County, and that just has to be, you know, basically communicated with a request that it be added to the circuit trails system. And that's a decision that the DVRPC folks make. The Circuit Trails Coalition Steering Committee frequently endorses those kinds of additions. So again, it's like if you wanted us to act on it, we would probably say, yeah, great. But getting that on the official map is a decision that we don't actually make.
yeah, I guess what I was trying to get to is if that segment was a planned segment someday to complete this connection,
Yes.
what kind of a priority score would that result in for that particular segment?
I don't
You know
know,
what I'm
can we do that where we can help essentially line in a proposed planned trail, like one that doesn't currently exist? This gets back to the, can you draw, can you
Yeah.
add stuff, and can you analyze stuff that's not there?
You can't draw, and you wouldn't be able to, it's not like you could draw it into the tool and the tool would spit out the number. But you probably could get an idea just from adding in those various layers, you know, adding in the different, taking a look at like, okay, you know, it connects to areas of high disadvantage, so it probably would get a pretty high equity score. You know, vehicle connects into areas where there's low vehicle availability, it would probably score highly there, and so forth. So you can add in all these different layers, and sort of you wouldn't be able to necessarily quantify that score. You could probably get some sense of where it would rank subjectively.
And zoom just back out a little bit, Helena, because I think that another thing that I would add to what you just said, which is all true, such a connection, Tim, would also give you a very high connectivity score, because clearly you can see that if you were able to connect to the existing Delaware and Raritan Trail in Trenton, that would, I mean, there is one connection already, but you'd suddenly have like a lot of miles connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, you know, you can be pretty sure that your trail would rank high.
Yeah, that's what we've been advocating for, this connection. Unfortunately, the right of way for the former rail line has been sold off and cut up into a million other uses. So we're looking at on-road options versus trying to shoehorn an off-road trail connection in here. But yeah, we're trying to make that connection as a priority in Mercer County. So I like I say, I think your approach is really helpful. And like you say, those maps show that this is a place where we should be concentrating our efforts. So thanks. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
It's a really good question, because we do mean for this to be, you know, I'm going to bring us home, I think, Z and Helena, you know, as I mentioned in my opening, you know, sort of frame about this, it's meant to be a tool to help us as we move forward to lean into the equity conversation. So I really appreciate, Tim, your question to us, because I think that this kind of gap actually illustrates what we know happens in underserved communities, which is, like I said, they're the densest places. They're the places where the right of way, in this case, it's been used for other purposes, isn't easy to get. And yet they're the connections that in many ways would serve the most people who have the greatest needs. So I think that those kinds of conversations we hope are framed by this tool and help us then to like take that back to our county planners and to the regional planners and say, this really has to be added onto the circuit trails, even though we know it's not going to be a low-hanging fruit. It's going to be a heavy lift, but we have to get working on it now. So
Yeah,
if you have
thanks.
any other questions for us, please shoot. You know how to find us. We're not hard to find. Send those to us. And I guess I just want to say thank you all for joining us. And maybe you could all just in your minds at least say, I mean, a round of applause for Z and Helena for putting this together.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Patrick. And just before everyone hops off, just wanted to let you know I'll be following up likely tomorrow with a link. I did drop the link to the gap analysis mapping portal in the chat, but I will be sending that out in an email along with the recording of this webinar. And if you have any questions, as Patrick mentioned, please definitely take some time on your own to look through this tool and let us know if anything else comes up. So thanks again.
All right. Yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.